Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. في قلوبهم مرض فزادهم الله مرضا. So after talking about the mu'mineen, the muttaqeen and the disbelievers, now there are many ayahs which are going to concentrate on hypocrites, on people who are munafiq, say one thing and do the other. They pretend to be Muslim, pretend to have taqwa, pretend to have tahara, pretend to be of the salihin, but actually they have inside them concealed poor intentions and weak intentions, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens them up. So like they conceal themselves, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unravels them to make them clear to the believer to be able to contradistinct them. So he begins by saying, in their hearts, fi qulubihim maradun, in their hearts is a disease. Now it's very interesting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses the organ qalb. Qalb means heart. Now as Muslims, we should really reflect on each word specifically chosen by the Holy Quran. Sometimes it talks about their sight going, their hearing going, their speech going. Sometimes it talks about their heart. Now the Quran could have mentioned any other organ. He could have said, in their kidneys there is a disease. Could have said in their liver there is a disease. It's a point of reflection for us. But specifically the qalb was mentioned. In some verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell us to reflect on something completely different. For example, He will say, reflect on the rain that I have sent down, or reflect on the fruits that I give you, or reflect on trees, or reflect on guidance. As Muslims, what we should do, and it's something that's not done often enough, is we should really delve into that topic and understand that in the real world. So for example, when the descriptions of heaven is given in the Holy Quran, the Quran does not talk about things that we're not aware of. It will mention trees which we see, mention gardens which we're aware of. It will mention rivers that we know and can understand, albeit the trees and gardens and rivers of paradise are unimaginable to us, but still they are mentioned so that we can relate to them. So if the Quran mentions qalb, the least we can do is understand the physical heart that Allah has given us to try to relate it to us. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions rain, we should take it on ourselves to learn about the hydrological cycle, which is how rain develops, whether that's transpiration through the plants, whether it's percolation through the rocks, whether it's evaporation through the seas, the formation of the clouds. We really should think and engage, and that's what our historic scholars used to do. So today is, and I am purposefully making it, an esoteric discussion. An esoteric discussion means a discussion of specialist knowledge, but I'm doing it with an intention to induce that thinking that we should actually reflect on what the actual heart is and how it's related and how it becomes diseased and why Allah would choose that word in this ayah. So fi qulubihim maradun. Marad, mariz, comes from disease. The heart itself is one of the most vital organs. When the heart stops, that is technical death. The heart itself, it pumps blood around the body, it oxygenates. When it becomes diseased, when a patient has heart failure, which is a relatively common diagnosis in the physical world, there are some symptoms that arise. One of the first non-constitutional symptoms of heart failure is lethargy and tiredness. So in the munafiq heart, the first thing you notice is a lethargy, is a tiredness, is a fatigue when it comes to the deen of Allah. You ask them to recite a surah, it feels like a mountain on their head. You ask them to pray, it feels like, I can't do that. I've got this going on, that going. There's a lethargy. When as-salatu khayrun min an-nawm is mentioned in the morning, the blanket cannot come off because there is a lethargy, there's a tiredness. As the heart diseases further, more symptoms manifest. The lungs begin to fill with fluid, and so even small tasks become difficult. Smiling at our parents, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ gave us the bishara that this would be equivalent to an accepted hajj, even that becomes a challenge. Cleaning the roads, where the Prophet ﷺ said this is the equivalent of a major good deed in Islam becomes something that is beneath us. I'm not a cleaner, why should I do that? So all of a sudden, the heart becomes diseased. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says next is just remarkable. Having already said, fi qulubihim, fi means inside, qulub means heart, marad means disease, in their hearts is a disease. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says something incredibly scary. He says, فَزَادَهُمُ marada. That Allah Himself, fazada, increases the disease Himself. Now, if a doctor makes a mistake, that can be quite catastrophic, but to make something worse. But when Allah Himself is saying, I'm going to make it worse, can you imagine the destruction of that? فَزَادَهُمُ marada. When the heart fails, and in this, if I can touch on a little bit of science, there's a mercy in this ayah as well, but then I want to link it to how it becomes a problem. When the heart fails, it's not pumping hard enough, the body has a physiological response, and it pumps to the heart adrenaline and noradrenaline to try to get the heart to beat more strongly, what's called a positive inotropic effect. So that's the normal response. So as it fails, it doesn't immediately just give up and a person suddenly becomes dyspneic and short of breath. What happens is the body tries to compensate. So spiritually, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not let His person just go. Actually, He gives them reminders. He might test them with tribulations. He might give them the death of a close family member. He might give them the loss of a business, the loss of a child. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ. He might test them with fear, hunger, etc., etc. And that's not to push him away from Allah, but to bring him closer. But if, despite those challenges, despite those proximities, despite those lessons, the person goes further, that same, in the physical world, that same adrenaline and noradrenaline, what it does is it begins to damage the heart. The heart remodels. It was the same mercy, it was the same chemicals coming to the heart, but instead of responding positively, it begins to fail even worse. So even within the diseased heart and Allah increasing it, there's still a mercy because He's still calling upon His person. But it's the person who is remodeling themselves away. في قلوبهم مرض فزادهم الله مرضا ولهم عذاب أليم بما كانوا يكذبون ولهم عذاب أليم. There is a great punishment for them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have concluded the ayah there that for these munafiq, for these people who I keep on calling to my path, they keep turning away from me, وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ, could have stopped there, there's a great punishment for them, but the two extra words are added, بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْذِبُونَ, due to their lies. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again mentions lies. What are lies? Lies are words. That's all they are. We feel it's nothing. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again mentions speech. Human being's speech is so significant. We think it's a quick deception, a quick sale here, just mention this. Half truth, white truth, black truth. There's so many ways of masquerading and clothing lies. We are aware of it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that it is, if a person becomes a liar, you'll soon see, first time they feel a bit guilty. You know what, I should not have sold him that car. I knew it had, brake fluid leaking. But then eventually it's like, well, the money's coming in. So then you become used to it, habitual lies and lies and lies, and so the disease gets worse and worse and worse. We're going to conclude on that one verse today. So in context, we talked about the believers, the disbelievers, and we've now started talking about the ayahs of the munafiqeen. Tomorrow's verse will relate to corruption, and that will put into context how societies crumble, how they fail, and will be a mirror to what is going on in the Muslim world at present. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to understand the Quran, and may He protect our hearts, may He protect our hearts from disease, and may He make us energetic towards the deen of Allah. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ.